Imagine this. A sleek white bullet train streaks across the Texas prairie at 205 miles per hour, cutting a 90-minute journey between Dallas and Houston down to a mere dreamlike blur. Inside, riders sip coffee, marveling at how quiet and smooth the ride is. It's Japan's famed Shinkansen, the bullet train, finally exported to American soil, now snapped back to reality. Today, that Texas high-speed rail line exists only on paper. The empty fields outside Dallas remain just that, empty. The vision of the Shinkansen conquering the world, still stuck at the station. So what went wrong with Japan's bullet train abroad? Why did a technology renowned for safety, speed, and punctuality struggle to find a home outside Japan? Japan's Shinkansen network debuted in 1964 as a symbol of futuristic travel, boasting a perfect safety record, 0 passenger fatalities in over half a century. It's arguably the gold standard of high-speed rail. By 2013, riding high on this prestige, Japan's leaders set an ambitious goal: triple infrastructure exports, from rails to nuclear plants, to 30 trillion yen by 2020. The Shinkansen, fast, reliable, and squeaky clean, was to be the crown jewel of this global growth strategy. Headline-friendly question: if the bullet train is so great, why isn't every country buying one? The answer is a twist of economics, politics, and some surprises on the rails. Let's dive in. Japan's bullet train isn't just a piece of rolling stock, it's an entire system. In fact, the very word Shinkansen means new trunk line, referring to the whole dedicated rail line, not just the train. You can't simply drop a Shinkansen train onto existing tracks abroad and expect magic. Everything, tracks, tunnels, signaling, maintenance routines, has to be built to exacting standards for it to replicate Japan's flawless performance. This all-in approach delivered phenomenal results at home, impeccable punctuality and safety records, but it also became Japan's double-edged sword overseas. Consider Taiwan, one of the rare places outside Japan where Shinkansen tech actually runs. When Taiwan High-Speed Rail launched in 2007, it used Japanese trains and hardware throughout. Tokyo saw it as proof that the bullet train export idea could work, and indeed, the hardware performed beautifully. But even Taiwan's system hit a wall: ridership and revenue. Despite zipping passengers from Taipei to Kaohsiung in 90 minutes, the line initially couldn't fill enough seats. Many Taiwanese stuck to cheaper buses or legacy trains. By 2015, the private operator was drowning in debt and needed a $1 billion government bailout to stay afloat. Only after restructuring and adding new stations did ridership climb enough to stabilize operations. The Taiwan case offered a sobering lesson. Having the world's best train means little if the business model doesn't fly. It was a warning that even a successful export could struggle under real-world market conditions. And it foreshadowed bigger struggles Japan would face elsewhere. By the mid-2010s, Japan's government and rail companies were in full-on sales mode. They talked of a Shinkansen World Tour, selling the technology as a premium, quality infrastructure export. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe personally played the role of top salesman, showcasing bullet trains during diplomatic visits. In one instance, Abe urged Singapore's Prime Minister to choose the Shinkansen for a proposed Singapore-Malaysia high-speed line, presenting it as a shining symbol of bilateral cooperation. Japan's pitch was clear: we have the safest, most reliable trains on Earth. And indeed, Japan's record was compelling. No fatal crashes in nearly 60 years, ultra-low emissions, and a habit of arriving within seconds of schedule. Countries around the globe initially showed interest. India wanted a bullet train between Mumbai and Ahmedabad. Vietnam flirted with a north-south high-speed line. Thailand talked with Japan about a Bangkok-Chiang Mai Shinkansen. Malaysia and Singapore signed an agreement to build that cross-border HSR link. Even the United Kingdom, birthplace of railways, was eager to upgrade its network and looked at high-speed options for its HS2 project. And then there was the big prize, the United States, where states like Texas and California dangled prospects of shiny new HSR lines. Japan's outreach was relentless. Official development aid, low-interest loans, public-private partnerships. Whatever it took to get Shinkansen deals on track. On paper, it seemed Japan's bullet train empire was poised to expand. But looks can be deceiving. One huge hurdle boiled down to money. High-speed rail is extraordinarily expensive to build. We're talking billions of dollars for a few hundred kilometers of line. Japan's Shinkansen, as a top-shelf product, doesn't come cheap. The trains, the earthquake-proof tracks, the signaling systems, it's a premium package, and Japan typically insists on selling it as a bundle, sometimes dubbed the Galapagos Syndrome of Japanese tech. You buy the whole ecosystem, not just the trains. For many countries, especially developing ones, that upfront price tag is a showstopper. Contrast this with Japan's biggest new rival, China. Over the past decade, China built the world's largest high-speed rail network at breakneck speed and developed its own exportable trains, ironically based in part on imported Japanese and European technology. When bidding abroad, Chinese consortia often undercut Japan on price and offer easy financing. Example, Indonesia, 2015. Japan had long courted Indonesia for a Jakarta-Bandung HSR project, assuming it was a done deal. But at the last minute, China swooped in with an offer Jakarta couldn't refuse. Beijing's pitch: we'll build it without requiring a penny of Indonesian government funding or guarantees, minimizing your financial risk. Japan, by contrast, stuck to its original proposal, which did involve government loans and support, and didn't budge on price, believing its superior quality would win the day. It didn't. China won that contract, shocking Tokyo. Insiders noted that Japan's package was simply costlier, and China's ability to quickly match Japan's technical specs while easing the financial burden tipped the scales. In Vietnam, a similar story played out more quietly. Hanoi loved the idea of a bullet train, but at an estimated cost approaching $60 billion, the National Assembly balked. The project was shelved in 2010 amid concerns it was just too expensive for a country at Vietnam's income level. To this day, Vietnam's high-speed rail remains in limbo, awaiting funding from development banks to even update feasibility studies. India, on the other hand, became a showcase for how far Japan would go to sweeten a deal. When Japan clinched the Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train project in 2015, it wasn't just selling trains, it was offering a gigantic finance package. Approximately 81% of the $14 billion cost is covered by a Japanese yen loan at just 0.1% interest over 50 years. That's basically near free money, a testament to how eager Tokyo was to land this contract. In fact, it's Japan's largest ever ODA loan to a single country. The logic was, invest now to lock in a long-term partnership and a flagship success story. Yet even with virtually no interest financing, India's project has struggled with delays, mainly over land acquisition squabbles. It turns out that money isn't the only obstacle. And what about the United States, the world's largest economy? Public funding for high-speed rail in the US is notoriously hard to come by. Federal support has been fickle, and local politics can doom ambitious rail plans, as California's faltering HSR project demonstrates. In this landscape, Japan tried a different strategy. Hitch its wagon to private enterprise. Enter Texas Central, a private Texan company that planned to build the Dallas to Houston line using Japanese trains. The Texan project proudly announced it would require zero public subsidies, a key selling point in a state skeptical of government spending. Central Japan Railway Company, JR Central, the Shinkansen operator, even agreed to act as a technical advisor and bring decades of expertise to ensure the line's success. Japan's government, through its infrastructure investment bank, JOIN, pitched in about 4.9 billion yen, roughly $40+ million, as equity to bolster the project's prospects. Tokyo's goal was not just to make a profit, but to plant the Shinkansen flag in American soil, a showcase to entice other states. For a while, optimism ran high. In 2017, Texas Central was confidently projecting to start construction that year and begin service by 2022. But by 2025, reality has hit hard. Construction still hasn't begun. The project remains mired in legal battles over land rights and has yet to secure all the financing needed. The no public funds mantra, while politically savvy, left the venture vulnerable to investor jitters. It's a stark illustration of a broader truth. Without strong government backing or deep pockets, high-speed rail projects struggle to leave the station. Let's return to that idea of the Shinkansen as a complete package, sometimes dubbed Galapagos Syndrome. In tech circles, this term describes a product so optimized for its home market's unique conditions that it doesn't adapt well elsewhere. Japan's cell phones in the early 2000s were famously advanced, yet failed abroad for this reason. The Shinkansen, too, has some Galapagos-like traits. The Shinkansen was born in a dense, earthquake-prone island nation where trains run like clockwork and dedicated high-speed tracks were built from scratch. As a result, the system has strict requirements: no sharp curves, no grade crossings with roads, platform screen doors for safety, meticulous maintenance regimes, etc. It's the secret sauce behind the stellar safety and punctuality, but it also means big upfront construction and sometimes inflexible standards. A Japanese rail executive once quipped, "You cannot just put a bullet train on a railway line in another country and expect it to work to Japanese standards." That's absolutely true. For many prospective buyers, the Shinkansen's all-or-nothing proposition became a choke point. Developing countries in particular looked at the price and complexity and got cold feet. For instance, Thailand's government, which signed early memorandums with Japan for high-speed rail, hesitated to commit fully to the costly Shinkansen system. Officials weighed whether something less extravagant, maybe a medium-speed railway or another country's cheaper tech, might suffice for their needs. In Indonesia, as we saw, the desire for a more cost-appropriate solution at one point led even the president to suggest downgrading to medium-speed rail before the Chinese deal came along. Another aspect of the Shinkansen's Galapagos nature is gauge and compatibility. Most Shinkansen lines use standard gauge track, 1,435 mm, separate from Japan's older narrow gauge network, and the trains are wider than typical European trains. While standard gauge is common globally, integrating a full Shinkansen system into an existing rail network can be challenging. In Europe, new high-speed lines often blend into the old network at some points, like French TGVs that can slow down and continue on conventional tracks. The Shinkansen philosophy eschews that mixing for safety reasons. It wants its own closed ecosystem. That's a harder sell in countries looking to gradually upgrade or where mixed operations are necessary. Japan's approach to exporting was initially rigid. They promoted the total package, emphasizing how every element from tracks to training manuals was perfected for maximum safety. This absolutism, however, ran up against practical questions from buyers. Do we really need everything done the Japanese way? Can we customize anything? Often the implied answer from Tokyo was, "We'd prefer you take it all as is." This created a gap between what Japan was offering and what some customers felt they needed or could afford. One vivid example was the Singapore-Malaysia HSR plan. Japan's pitch heavily emphasized Shinkansen's impeccable record, a train system so safe you can set your watch by it. But behind closed doors, Malaysian officials were reportedly doing their own math and asking, could a less expensive technology deliver 80% of the benefit at, say, 50% of the cost? Malaysia ultimately put the project on hold and later cancelled it amid a change in government and cost concerns, meaning Japan never got the chance to find out if its bid would have won. The mere fact that this high-profile project evaporated reflects how politically and financially fraught these deals can be. In short, Japan's insistence on the full Shinkansen system, train, track, and soul, made their offering less flexible. It was all deluxe or nothing, which in many cases led to nothing when budgets or political will couldn't match the vision. Another major factor in play: who controls the technology and know-how? Countries buying high-speed rail often don't just want a train set delivered. They want local industry involved, jobs created, and skills transferred. And here, Japan faced a delicate dilemma. Historically, Japan had been cautious about sharing its crown jewels. The Shinkansen was a source of national pride and competitive advantage. Japanese firms preferred to export components and expertise, but keep the core R&D and manufacturing at home or under their direct control. In some cases, Japan's offers were seen as less generous on local production or technology transfer compared to competitors. This issue came sharply into focus with China. Back in the mid-2000s, when China was gearing up its high-speed network, it actually imported Shinkansen technology under license. Kawasaki Heavy Industries and other Japanese companies sold China a number of train sets, based on Japan's 700 series and E2 Shinkansen models, and provided technical blueprints. Similar deals were done with German, Siemens, and French Alstom companies for other train models. The understanding, or hope, on Japan's side was that China would continue to buy more trains, or at least pay royalties as they built out their system. That's not what happened. Instead, China absorbed the tech, mixed it, and then innovated on top of it to create its own indigenous HSR trains, branded CRH and now Fuxing. Within a few years, Chinese engineers were tweaking designs for higher speeds and different operating conditions, like developing trains that can handle extremely hot or cold climates, or adjustable for different track gauges. By around 2010, China essentially stopped importing foreign train sets. It was building them all domestically, and the students had arguably matched the teachers. For Japan, this was a lesson in the risks of technology transfer. Your partner today could become your competitor tomorrow, armed with your technology. So when it came to new export deals in places like India or Southeast Asia, Japanese negotiators were a bit more guarded. They wanted to avoid another scenario where they'd give away the shop. Japan's offer to India, for example, included generous financing, but the core components, like the rolling stock, signaling systems, etc., would come from Japan. India would get training and some local assembly of parts, but Japan aimed to maintain quality control and protect its IP. India, for its part, insisted on as much local Make-in-India content as feasible, which is a negotiation still in progress as the project unfolds. Meanwhile, China was taking a very different tack in its overseas bids. It often agreed to build factories in the customer country, train local engineers, and effectively hand over a lot of know-how. The Chinese playbook focuses on winning the contract and establishing influence, even if it means sacrificing some short-term intellectual property protection. For instance, in some African railway projects, though not high-speed rail, China has built assembly plants and heavily involved local labor. In Indonesia's HSR project, Chinese companies agreed to a joint venture structure with Indonesian state firms, hinting at eventual knowledge sharing. Japan's more cautious approach sometimes made their bids look less attractive to governments who wanted technology transfer as part of the deal. It's a tricky balance. How do you protect a proprietary system's integrity and your future business, while also meeting a country's demand to develop their own capabilities? There's no easy answer, but it's clear that Japan's reluctance to fully localize production in some cases was a constraint in its export campaign. An interesting counterpoint is the UK experience. When Britain needed trains for its new high-speed commuter line, HS1 connecting to the Channel Tunnel, in the mid-2000s, Hitachi stepped up with its modern electric trains. To win over skeptics, Hitachi not only delivered excellent trains, the Class 395 Javelin, but also invested in the UK, building a rolling stock factory in England for subsequent orders. British rail folks were initially wary of a Japanese company known more for TVs and fridges than trains. But after proving reliability and even offering free trials of their train control equipment on UK tracks, Hitachi gained credibility. They won the contract, delivered on time, a revelation in delay-prone UK, and ended up being praised as the first trains delivered on schedule in UK memory. Today, Hitachi's UK factory employs hundreds, and a Hitachi-Alstom joint venture is set to build the next generation of HS2 trains for Britain. This shows Japan can localize and transfer know-how when it chooses to, and indeed, doing so was key to succeeding in the UK market. The UK case is somewhat unique, a rich country with no domestic high-speed train producer by that time, but it underscores a lesson. To sell trains, sometimes you have to also sell the expertise by planting roots locally. Japan's global push gradually learned this. Companies like Hitachi and Kawasaki started partnering with local firms, opening overseas facilities, or acquiring foreign train makers. Hitachi's purchase of Italy's Ansaldo-Breda, for example. These moves were partly to shed the Galapagos skin and be seen as a more global, integrated player. However, these efforts came a bit late to change the outcome in some big bids Japan had already lost. It's impossible to discuss Japan's faltering rail exports without spotlighting the competition, primarily China, but also European makers. The global high-speed rail market in the 21st century turned into a slugfest among a few key players. Canada's Bombardier, France's Alstom, and Germany's Siemens long dominated the scene alongside Japan. But by the 2010s, China's CRRC had surged to become the gorilla in the room, boasting the world's largest domestic HSR network as a proving ground and looking to conquer overseas markets. China often leveraged its geopolitical clout and financial muscle through the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, to push rail projects. It's not just about selling trains, it's about building influence. Chinese-led projects came with attractive loans, often through state banks or newer institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and bundled infrastructure deals. For example, in some countries, a railway might be tied to deals for resource development or other construction projects, making the offer part of a broader package that greases the wheels diplomatically. Japan, to its credit, recognized this shifting landscape. It responded by coining the term quality infrastructure, essentially pitching that, while Japan might not be the cheapest, it offers higher quality and life cycle value, from safety to durability. Japanese aid and loans were recalibrated to highlight these aspects, implicitly drawing a contrast with Chinese offerings. Officials from Tokyo slyly hinted that some fast and cheap projects might come with hidden costs or lesser reliability. In Southeast Asia, for instance, Japanese diplomats would point out how Shinkansen-derived systems, like Taiwan's, had impeccable safety, while reminding decision-makers of the notorious 2011 accident in China, the Wenzhou train collision, that raised questions about Chinese safety oversight. Still, when push came to shove, many governments faced a basic political calculus: capital cost. Legislators and publics often see the price tag first and foremost. As one observer noted, a buyer might say, "Sure, your Shinkansen is amazing, but if I can save a few $1 billion, I'm okay with a train that's 5 minutes slower, or that might be down 1% more often." That trade-off, safety performance versus cost, often tilted in favor of Japan's rivals. Even South Korea became a competitor, exporting its derivative KTX trains, based originally on French tech, to countries like Turkey and potentially bidding in other places. The Koreans could undercut Japan's price while still offering a solid, if not quite Shinkansen-level product. In Indonesia's case study again, experts analyzing Japan's defeat concluded that being technically best wasn't enough. One Japanese engineer lamented that while Japanese engineers and technology are highly respected abroad, the Japanese side often failed in aggressive business tactics. Competitors from China or Korea, he implied, were hungrier, willing to negotiate hard on price, adapt proposals swiftly, and close deals with a killer instinct, whereas Japan remained somewhat formal and slow in its approach. In a sense, Japan took pride in the virtues of its product, expecting that to shine through, while competitors focused on the feel-good factors for the client: low price, easy financing, quick build times, political sweeteners. It didn't help Japan that some of its target markets underwent political changes that derailed projects entirely. In Malaysia, a new government in 2018 put the brakes on the Kuala Lumpur-Singapore HSR, citing its high cost in a climate of fiscal belt-tightening. Japan and other bidders saw that golden opportunity vanish overnight. In the US, political winds shifted such that California's marquee HSR project lost support for its full vision, and federal funding priorities changed. High-speed rail can be a political football, and Japan often found itself on the losing end of those scrimmages through no fault of its own. So, was Japan simply outmaneuvered? In many cases, yes, particularly by China's state-backed juggernaut. But it's also fair to say the market evolved. When Japan pioneered bullet trains in the 1960s, it had no peers. By the 2010s, everyone wanted in on high-speed rail, and Japan was just one player in a crowded field. The Shinkansen turned 60 years old in 2024, and ironically, at 60, it found itself largely stuck at home while others' trains proliferated abroad. That's a dramatic reversal of fortune that few would have predicted decades prior.